A seven-figure number was placed on the table. Headlines were ready, press releases were drafted. This was supposed to be the moment the WNBA silenced every critic and finally locked in its future. For years, the league had been fighting the same narrative. Not enough money, not enough attention, not enough respect. And now, executives believed they finally had proof that things were changing. But instead of celebration, the league got rejection. Not hesitation, not delays, a flat-out no. And when Caitlin Clark and the Players Association walked away from what was being framed as a historic offer, it didn't just stall negotiations. It triggered a chain reaction that may have cost the commissioner her job.
WNBA Finals, and so I'll leave it there. I mean, I'm just obviously disheartened. You know, I'm a human too. I have a family. I have two kids who are devastated by these comments, and so all I'll say is just, you know, it's obviously been.
Because this was never just about money. It was about power. The deal that was rejected was supposed to change everything. According to reports, the WNBA had finally offered a structure where top players could earn over $1 million a year through a combination of salary, bonuses, and incentives. Compared to where the league was just a few seasons ago, that number sounded massive. It looked like progress. It looked like a breakthrough. It looked like proof the league was listening. But players like Caitlin Clark didn't see it as a win. They saw it as a ceiling because behind the scenes, something much bigger had already happened. The WNBA had secured a new media rights deal reportedly worth over $2 billion spread across the next decade. That wasn't survival money. That wasn't keeping the lights on money. That was transformation money. And once that number became known, the entire deal started to fall apart. The players realized the league was trying to lock them into fixed salaries, while ownership kept the upside. Bigger paychecks? Yes, but the same structure, the same control, more money without real ownership. For stars like Caitlin Clark, that wasn't acceptable. Because this generation of athletes thinks differently. They don't just want higher salaries. They want partnership. They want revenue sharing. They want a percentage of the business they are actively growing. They understand the value of brand power. They understand leverage. And most importantly, they understand timing. So when the offer came in capped, even with flashy headline numbers designed to sound generous, the players didn't hesitate. They rejected it. That rejection sent shockwaves through the league office. Because when players led by Caitlin Clark turn down historic money, it sends a message that can't be ignored. The old leverage is gone. For decades, leagues negotiated from a position of control. Players needed the system more than the system needed any single player. That balance has shifted. And that's when leadership started to feel real pressure, because a commissioner has two jobs: keep the owners confident and keep the players cooperative. And in that moment, both sides began to drift. Owners worried the players were pushing too far, too fast. Players felt leadership still didn't understand the moment they were living in. And this tension didn't begin with the CBA. The cracks were already showing long before negotiations ever started. Travel issues had been a constant frustration. Charter flights were promised, but rolled out unevenly. Some teams had them, others didn't. Players talked quietly about fatigue, safety, and fairness. Then there were overseas prioritization rules, policies that forced athletes to choose between the WNBA and higher paying opportunities abroad. For players who depended on those overseas contracts to supplement their income, it felt like punishment, not progress. And then came the interview players never forgot. When leadership was asked about online hate, harassment, and the racial tensions surrounding the league's rising popularity, the response didn't land. There was no hard line, no strong stance, no clear protection of the players. Instead, the answer sounded corporate, careful, detached. Players felt abandoned. For someone like Caitlin Clark, whose presence brought unprecedented attention and unprecedented scrutiny, silence from the league office spoke volumes. She didn't ask to become the center of controversy. She didn't ask for the pressure, but she handled it anyway. And while the league hesitated, the numbers exploded. This became what many now call the Caitlin Clark effect. Ticket prices surged. Arenas sold out across the country. TV ratings jumped. Merchandise moved faster than ever before. Suddenly, The WNBA wasn't explaining its relevance anymore. It was proving it. And the players noticed something important. The league's growth wasn't happening because of marketing decks, sponsorship pitches, or executive strategy meetings. It was happening because stars like Caitlin Clark were putting fans in seats. And yet, the league was still negotiating like it held all the cards. That disconnect changed everything. Caitlin Clark didn't need to publicly demand change. She didn't call press conferences. She didn't issue statements. Her alignment with the players' union said enough. In modern sports, superstars don't beg. They leverage, and while the WNBA was still adjusting to that reality, another threat emerged outside the league. Unrivaled. A player-founded league offering equity, six-figure salaries for shorter seasons, and a player-first structure. For the first time, stars like Caitlin Clark had a legitimate alternative. The WNBA was no longer the only option. That changed negotiations overnight. Because once players have options, power shifts instantly. Owners suddenly faced a terrifying truth. Players didn't need them the way they once did. And when the league still couldn't close a deal with players led by Caitlin Clark, panic reportedly set in. Because now the stakes were enormous. A lockout heading into 2026 would be catastrophic. Right after the league's biggest growth year ever. TV partners would lose premium content. Sponsors would lose exposure. Momentum would vanish overnight. Ownership couldn't afford that, so attention turned upward. Toward leadership, publicly, everything stays polite. Statements about mutual respect, gratitude for service, carefully worded corporate language. But timing tells the real story. The deal gets rejected, negotiations stall, pressure spikes, and suddenly, leadership is under review. This isn't about one person failing. It's about a system that didn't evolve fast enough. The commissioner was hired to stabilize the league, and she did. But stabilizing a league and leading a thriving one are two different jobs. And once Caitlin Clark helped push the WNBA into a new era, the old approach stopped working. Now, critics are already framing the players as greedy, ungrateful, asking for too much, too soon. But that argument collapses under basic math. NBA players receive roughly half of basketball-related income. WNBA players receive a fraction of that, even as revenues soar. Players like Caitlin Clark aren't asking for imaginary money. They're asking for a fair share of what they generate. And fans see it. Sold-out arenas don't lie. Ratings don't lie. The money is there. Which brings us to what happens next. If leadership truly changes, the league enters uncharted territory. The next commissioner inherits a high-pressure job with zero margin for error. Pick a former player, and it signals compromise. Pick another corporate executive, and it signals resistance. Either way, the players aren't blinking. They've saved money. They've built brands. They have options, and stars like Caitlin Clark have fundamentally shifted the balance of power. The WNBA is at a crossroads. Adapt and share power, or cling to control and risk collapse. Because one thing is clear, the deal is dead, the commissioner may be gone, and the future of women's basketball is being rewritten in real time. With Caitlin Clark at the center of it all, this story isn't over. It's just getting started.